You're listening to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. In this episode, we're featuring a session from Winter Institute 2023 called Managing Returns.
My name is Jenny Cohen. My husband and I own Wacoma Bookstore, which is about 4 hours from here in Hood River, Oregon. We are a 1,400 square foot store with 7 part-time employees in a rural tourist town. So,
nice. My name is Zachary Metelski, and I am operations manager for McLennan Aiken Booksellers in Petoskey, Michigan. It's also a super highly resort town. Our store is about 5,000 square feet, split on 2 levels, and we have, I think, 14 employees right now.
I'm Elena Trucker. We have, from Napa Book Mine, we have 3 stores in Napa Valley in California. One of them is about 1,800 square feet and is mostly used books. One is 400 square feet, and the third is 200 square feet. We've got about 16 employees, about half of which are part and half of which are full-time.
all right. So I'm just going to take a quick survey. How many of you already do returns? Oh, good chunk. How many of you, this is your kind of the first go at it, learning more? Okay.
Welcome.
Yeah. So the nice thing about this industry is that we can return books. Many retailers that are not book retailers can't return books. So we're just going to quickly run down what our returns process is in our store, and then we're going to go from there. Let's see. Oh, whoops, I forgot that one. Okay, let me see if I can go back. Oh, yes. Don't forget to evaluate the session. If you came late, please add this session to your app so you can access that. Okay. So our in our store, we have a schedule-ish. Basically what happens is my staff will be like, we don't have return room in the kids section. We need to pull returns again because new books are coming in. It's really not the ideal. I do have a schedule. So we pull returns. My point of sale system is Anthology. If you want more information about how to do returns in Anthology, I'm happy to connect with you later because I have a how-to do that. But we're going to focus more kind of processes and efficiencies and not necessarily point of sale focused. So we pull returns. We change them to returns. We put them in our system, our point of sale system. We put them in the back. And then we have a person that usually it's the weekend person that processes those returns. So everything in the back is sorted by boxes, and we pull by section, not publisher, which is kind of I don't want to say contentious, but everybody has their opinion on how you should pull by section or whether it's by publisher. We pull by section, and then we pack them up and we send them out. I track them, and we also track whether it's been received at the publisher or not, and then we have a whole process where we make sure we get that credit. I don't want to go into depth, but I'll let Zach go ahead.
Sure. So we have a similar system. We have our children's buyer, our children's frontlist buyer is our lead returner, and so she is the one who decides what section to pull and when to pull. We largely use Edelweiss Analytics as a kind of a identifier to find sections that are stale or sections that have a lot of books in them that could be pulled. And we do 2 pretty large returns a year. We're, like I said, super touristy. So we have a really busy summer and a slow spring and slow fall. So we'll pull in spring and fall. And throughout the year, in between those times, if we have sections that are bursting or we need more room on the shelf, we will pull those sections too. But in the spring and fall, we used Edelweiss Analytics to find the sections that need it the most. We attend to those sections first, and we try to get every section in the store at least twice a year. We have our return shelf is behind the counter downstairs, and it's just a very large bookshelf that's on the floor that we actually pull from if people want things. But the publishers, we have Velcroed publisher name tags on the shelves. So as we're pulling, we can just add them to these shelves, and when the shelf is full, we can pull them and put them in a box and return them. and we track shipping and credits with publishers as well.
So I have a return schedule that I have on Google Docs, on Google Spreadsheets, and I return on a frequency based on how much we buy from that publisher. So my guess is most of us in this room buy mostly from Penguin Random House. So I schedule every 3 months to do a Penguin Random House return. I have publishers that we return every 3 months, publishers that we return every 4 months, and publishers that we return every 6 months. And then every 6 months, I also do a full store report to try and pull anything that fell through the cracks or any small publishers that we just don't buy very much from. And so that spreadsheet helps me keep track of what is in progress, what has been finished, what is still left to go in the month. I try to schedule it so that there are no more than 4 returns scheduled per month, so 1 per week about. And that is used for all 3 stores. It's not just for our biggest store, it's for everyone. We do keep little stacks underneath the counter for hardcovers when the paperback's been released or stuff like that. And once that stack gets kind of big, we'll just do a return. We are going to be moving our main store in a couple of months, at which point we will have an actual receiving and shipping back room, which we're very excited about, where we will then be able to have shelves for each publisher and have it be a little less haphazard and not take up space behind the counter, because that definitely, it can get cumbersome sometimes, for sure.
Yeah, I think I have more pictures of maybe it's mine. My bookshelves sorted by, and Zach's bookshelves of sorting by publisher. I mean, our biggest criteria is it paying for its space on the shelf? And our staff learns that very quickly. If it's not paying for its space, it needs to go, regardless of its book or non-book. So I forgot to mention, one of the biggest things for our store is that since we are in a tourist area that's cyclical, we do a ton of returns. This is a very old copy of my PRH account, but we return so much that it, during our slow season, can cover a lot of our bills. And I do the same with a combination of that and co-op to get us through the slow months till we get to about May, when people start coming back into town again. So it's been very helpful for us. And one of the things we were talking about during our session is kind of the link between buying and returns, and how that all is kind of a cycle that goes together. I guess I'll let you guys kind of talk about.
Sure. So for buying, we, in the last, basically since COVID, we've changed our buying habits pretty drastically. For titles that we have a staff member who's really excited about it, or titles that have a regional tie-in, we will order massive amounts. Then, instead of having to reorder many times, for example, The Firekeeper's Daughter, which is a huge book for our store because she lives locally, and she comes in and signs all the books, and people love it. We ordered 2,000 copies, and we don't have a back room or anywhere to store these books, so they're just everywhere. But we know that we're going to go through them. We know people want to, will want this book, so it really changes the way we think about buying and returns, because we're not. Normally we have a criteria of about 3 months before we'll pull something for returns. But when we do it, when we're buying large amounts of titles that we know will sell, we don't follow that system really at all. And whatever we have left over when the paperback comes out, we will return. But yeah, so that's something we've been doing that's helped out a little bit.
Yeah. So the link between buying and returning is definitely. It's very interconnected, and similarly to what Jenny was showing with her statement, that's the reason that I do publisher returns instead of section returns, and that's the reason why I have this schedule where the publishers we're paying the most to are the ones we want to do the most returns to, so that we get the most credits from those publishers, so that those monthly statements are not quite so insane. And I try to do a big chunk of returns in September, October, knowing that we're buying in a ton of stock during those months and being invoiced for a ton during those months but we often get pretty good dating during the holidays. So I want to have all those credits in place by the time I have to pay for all of those books. And it really makes a tremendous difference. And, not every store can have the same person doing front list or restock buying as is doing returns. I strongly recommend it if it's possible for you. I do all of our restock buying and I create all of our returns lists. And it's so helpful to be able to look at that returns list that's generated. We use Basil as our point of sale and see there are middle grade series that I don't want to get rid of every one of the, I want to keep all of my copies of Keeper of the Lost Cities, even if I haven't sold book number 3 in 6 months. It's worth it to me to keep that on the shelf. If I wasn't the restock buyer, if I didn't have such a handle on what we were buying in our stores and having what we were stocking in our stores, what we wanted to stock in our stores, it would be difficult for me because I would just be going off of, it's been here more than 3 months and we haven't sold it, get rid of it. Having that knowledge is super crucial for me to be able to make considered decisions about what I'm returning. And also for restock, what I'm buying back in. If something takes 6 months to sell and it's not part of a series, it's not a big author, it's not a local author or something, don't buy it back in. I don't want to have to task my staff with spending time getting rid of something because I'm like, it's sold, buy it. It's sold, buy it. It's not a good way to do it. You're going to end up with a lot of stale stock. And what Jenny said about it needs to pay for its shelf space, I think about it is every book needs to pay its rent. It has to be, and that's essentially what turns are. But before I understood what turns were, that was how I thought of it. A book has to pay its rent in order to be worthwhile on the shelf. But some rent spaces are subsidized. I'm going to keep my C.S. Lewis screw tape letters, even though I only sell maybe one every 6 or 7 months because it's a classic and people come in looking for it, blah, blah, blah. So I wanted to add that in that was a good way for me, who is not a math-minded person, to think of how often you want to be returning something and whether it's worth returning sooner rather than later or vice versa.
Yeah, I do the front list buying. So, my husband does the back list buying and the daily orders. So it's really good for me to go through and kind of see when I run a report and print it out of Anthology of, we have this criteria, and it used to be 6 to 9 months, and we've just really tightened it up, and it's now 3 months or less. Or, for example, right now, part of the reason I'm remodeling and just finished remodeling is exactly what Zach was saying. Our buying habits changed during the pandemic and since the pandemic, where I'm in a small rural town. If I don't have that book on the shelf, I'm going to lose that sale. So some of the local stuff we're going to keep much longer than other things. I needed the storage space to do that because they often will close our freeway from Portland to Hood River when there's snow and ice, and I won't get my Ingram shipments. So in the fall, I have to really buy up anticipation for that. Now, if you're a publisher in the room, you're probably not going to want to do this. When I did the remodel, we returned a ton of stuff, a ton, knowing that we would restock and redo the whole entire store. So it's going to vary from store to store, your criteria. And I have staff that's sometimes on the floor more than I am, go through my list and cross out things that they think or that they know are recommends, that they know are things that we sell, not maybe every week, but consistently enough that we should be keeping it because they have the eyes on there. And I have a small staff. And then it's my new staff and my high schooler that learn how to do returns. It's one of the first things you learn to do. You learn how to pull them. You learn how to change them in the computer to the return section because that's how we know if something's in the back if a customer wants it. And it's a really good way for newer staff to learn the sections and what's selling and not selling, at least at my store.
I totally agree with that, by the way. Pulling returns is a great way to learn the store and have to touch every single shelf and get to learn what is a shelf that's too full and a shelf that's too empty. What are face outs? It's a really, really great tool for training.
Shipping.
Shipping.
Oh, wait. I think you talked about stickering at one point also, Zach, right?
Yeah. How many people put stickers on the books? Okay, so about half of you. So it's a struggle that we're dealing with right now. We use WordStock as our point of sale system, and we put a sticker on every single book that comes in. And I was talking to both of them about this. Having staff put stickers on the books only to take stickers off the books when we return them seems crazy, but it really does help us. And on the sticker, it says what publisher we got the book from. So it helps us know when we're pulling from a section. We don't even necessarily need a report. You can just look at the sale date on the sticker and look at the publisher it came from. So we can go through a section pretty quickly and pull everything off. I'm moving towards probably not going to sticker books anymore, just because I think it's a time killer. But it really does help when you're doing returns.
And I'll just add that that's one reason why I pull by publisher and not generally by section, is because it makes it so easy to know that everything I'm pulling on this list is going into the same box. I will occasionally pull by section. If something gets really tight, I'll totally do a section pull, and we'll look at the imprints, and that's also a time waster because Ingram is not super accurate when it comes to telling you where these books actually come from. I've actually found Edelweiss is the most helpful way to do that, because I can look, if you click the little refs arrow so that it expands the catalogs that it's in, that's how you can see what publisher it actually comes from most recently, because they keep buying and selling each other, those weirdos.
Yeah, I have a double check where we pull, and my staff knows how to look in Ingram or into our point of sale systems to know which box to put it in when they change it to the return section. So we have two sections in Anthology. We have the return section on the top if we're moving it into there, and then we'll put the section it was in into the second part. So that way, because we're a small enough store, if a customer comes in and wants that book and maybe we just recently pulled it, they can go to the back and go into that publisher box and pull that out for the customer, and we can sell it. I have a double check. I have a set of directions specific to how we do things in Anthology and in our store. And one of those double checks is if you've packed up the box and you're getting ready to prep it to do your return memo, send it back to the publisher. If it's a big publisher, we go through PubEasy. And that's our double check where you scan into PubEasy for that publisher. And if it kicks back something that says that this ISBN is not valid, then we know that that publisher no longer carries that. Or we just make the reps do the work, to be honest. I'll email our rep or sometimes the I don't want to call them help desk staff, but the publisher customer service will email them and be like, can you tell me if these books are returnable? Because they're not showing up on PubEasy. And I guess the other important question is it returnable and what was its return date? Like if it's the remainder date is important and when they're not carrying it anymore date, as you were saying, they move around, because you can still return by the one publisher in particular, you can return within the once it gets remaindered with I think 3 months it is, and we've still been able to return books. Keep in mind that my store didn't have a point of sale when I took it over, and they didn't do any returns. So
right. And that's also another reason to be doing returns on a regular basis and to have some sort of schedule, because if something is on your shelf for too long and you try to return it, they will send it right back to you. And they will really stuck with it.
Yeah, you're stuck with it. And if you're not careful and you accidentally label the wrong box, I've only had this happen a couple times, you pay for the return shipping.
Yep. That's a fun one.
That's a fun one. Send the whole box back and be like, none of these are our titles. Here's a bill for the shipping back to you. And it's not usually a cheap bill because they'll use whatever they have handy, like UPS, and it's not going to go media mail, which again is another debate within returns. I've always used media mail to send back returns with tracking and not had any issues. When we had a regional distributor, Partners West, for some of you that have been around for a while, Partners West was based here in Renton, Washington. It was cheaper for me to go FedEx returns by regional rates. So it is worth price comparing. What do you, use?
So we use almost exclusively FedEx to send returns back. And it's mainly because we live really far north in Michigan, and we have bad luck with medium mail shipping. And I think it's because it has to leave Michigan, it has to go for 6 hours, and it just gets lost sometimes. So just for ease of mind, we do ground FedEx with tracking, and we've never had a problem with it at all.
So we switched to Pirate Ship a few years ago, which is free software that we use, and we really like it. It picks for you what the cheapest option is for that pirate ship. So like you're sailing a pirate ship, and their customer service uses pirate terms, and it's very cute. But they will rate out for you exactly how much each option, and that includes UPS and maybe not FedEx yet.
It's definitely UPS and...
It's definitely UPS and USPS.
Yeah.
And it'll tell you what the cheapest option is. It'll tell you whether you can get insurance with whichever option. By and large, we pretty much send everything USPS media mail. Occasionally UPS is cheaper, but very rarely. We have absolutely gotten like the label back in the mail with no box and missing items. Trying to do insurance, and we buy insurance for any box that contains over $100 net in books. If we lose a box that has less than that, we write it off. If it's more, we want to try to get a claim. And Pirate Ship makes it pretty easy to do that. Going through USPS, it specifically is a real pain in the butt, but Pirate Ship walks you through it, which is great. So we have lost boxes with media mail. So it's not perfect. It may just be that the Oakland center is crap or something. I don't know. That ours is just bad. But maybe twice a year, not frequently by any means.
Yeah, I think we've only lost 1 or 2 boxes in the time that we've used media mail. We use a combination of Pirate Ship and stamps.com, only because we also have set it up so that when our person that's shipping stuff in, for returns, who happens to also be our indie commerce web person that does all of our web orders and processes them and pulls them, packs them up, we have it set up so that it will pull in everything into stamps.com. If we're only going to do 1 or 2 boxes, then we'll do Pirate Ship. We have all the addresses set up in an Excel sheet for our returns where they can just be copied and pasted into another Excel sheet as a CSV, and that CSV stamps.com is set up so that it pulls from the returns spreadsheet, it pulls from our indie commerce web export for shipping, and it pulls from what we call the in-store shipping spreadsheet so that we can pull them all in at once and just print once. Pirate Ship doesn't, at least we haven't figured out a way to do that in there where it's all different rates, media mail, priority mail, and other things. We can, if it's all one rate, like media mail, then we can do it all in Pirate Ship.
I want to say that we've done, when we've had a bulk order from someone where we're shipping out the same book, that as long as if it's the same weight and dimensions, but going to different places, when we've done it into Pirate Ship where we upload it and have it will, unless you overwrite it, it will pick whatever's cheapest. And that may be different services for different addresses.
Good to know.
You can't send UPS or FedEx to a P.O. box. Everybody knows that, right? Because that has burned us many times.
You can't send priority at FedEx or UPS without a phone number.
Ah, yeah.
Same.
You can't. She said you can't send priority FedEx or UPS without a phone number. All these little things.
So what happens once we ship them? In our store, we have a tracking system. Once we've shipped everything, we use, and I can't remember the website, we use a particular website that my husband found where we can dump the tracking number in a note, and it will automatically email us updates as to where those boxes are. This is very helpful in the sense that we've had boxes where the publishers have said, we can't give you credit for that box because we never received it. And we'll be like, well, actually, it arrived in your warehouse at X amount of time, and it's just been sitting there. So I absolutely want credit for that, which in some cases people think, well, that's a lot of work, but it adds up. That box for us typically could be like $230, and I want that $230 credit to use. I also keep, we're a little old school in the sense that we do our own QuickBooks and bookkeeping in, so every time a return is sent out, that return memo goes into a folder that my husband has, that has all of our invoices for all the shipments that we've received and a bunch of other things. We put that in there, and then as soon as we get the credit, it moves somewhere else. And that's how we track it. Now, if it's in his folder for a really long time, then we know to call the publisher or email the publisher and be like, hey, we haven't gotten this credit yet. And that's definitely, again, some people think that's a lot of work to track that, but it's definitely worth our time because unfortunately you're going to have to do that.
So we have a Google Drive. We use Google Drive for like everything at the store. It's amazing. But we have an Excel file. It's not Excel, it's Google Drive. But we have an Excel file with all of our all the addresses for shipping, all of our account numbers, everything that we need to know about each publisher for returning to them. And that's shared with everyone on staff. So anybody who's processing a return has all the information that they need. And we have all of the addresses for the publishers saved in our FedEx software too. So no matter what, all the information's right there. When we ship out a box, we keep the tracking and put it on our return purchase order. And so we can keep track of that, and we give that to our bookkeeper, who is the one who's looking for the credits from the publisher. But having that Google Drive is a lifesaver because they've changed shipping warehouses many times.
So we also use Google spreadsheets and Google Docs for everything. When we ship out one return per box, meaning in my point of sale system, one return is everything that's in that box. And we put the return number physically on the shipping label so that if that label does come back to us because it fell apart or whatever, I know exactly what is in that box, and that's what I use to submit my insurance claim. We did not have a tracking system until the planning session, and I was like, why don't we have a tracking system? So I made a tracking system, which is literally just a tab on the Google spreadsheet that says return number, publisher, date sent out, tracking number, and then date landed. So we check it like once a week to see when it landed. And then date that the credit was issued. So we can check if there's anything missing or taking super long. And I don't know why we didn't do that before because it's so easy and yet could end up saving you a lot. So that's why we go to panels like this exactly. To learn.
Yeah, so my husband and I love spreadsheets. We're numbers people. So same thing, we track, what credits we've had. We even have a master spreadsheet for every year where I literally, on the bottom of each one, every time we get a credit, we put it in the publisher. So I can see every year, like how much we've returned. My husband's really into details. How long it took to get there, how long it took for us to get that credit, and the credit memo number. But we do the same thing too. We put all of our, what we call in Anthology, return memo numbers in the shipping information, so we just know in case something happens to that box.
And it makes it easy to, if something has taken a really long time to get a credit, that you can just send, the PDF of that return packing list to your rep and say, hey, this box either has been sitting at the warehouse forever, we haven't gotten a credit, or we're not sure if it ever reached you. And they can then see because, the return has the invoice number for each item and the quantities and all of that. And they can see whether maybe it did land and got credited to somebody else or whatever happened. it definitely, it helps to have it like separated out like that.
Well, I don't see any hands for questions yet, but
Did you want to?
do you
Oh, yeah,
grab,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
We're using the mics just so that it's recorded.
Oh, okay.
I don't want to take up a lot of your time, but I have a few questions. The thing about the Edelweiss analytics,
Yeah.
do y'all not use Ingram that much and return anything from Ingram?
Oh,
I have a couple. I have a couple questions, so
Yeah.
I'll keep the mic for a second.
yeah. Okay, so Ingram's a whole, now, let's say we've got Ingram Wholesale and we've got Ingram Publishing Services. Now, keep in mind, they all used to go to the same warehouse. That was real fun.
They do not now.
They don't
They are
now. Separate. Which in my mind has actually made it a little bit easier. I think the trickiest part about Ingram is figuring out if that small publisher is still part of Ingram Publishing Services or whether that book that you have is a wholesale book. I mean, I've taught in recent years, taught my booksellers to literally pack up that box, scan it into just the main Ingram page where you like search for things, and there's a -2 Rivers, a -IPS, there's a -Consortium.
I'm afraid you might have misunderstood what I was asking. From what I understood was how y'all used Edelweiss Analytics was to determine how long something had sat on the shelf.
Yeah, well, so
Yeah.
And so I was, maybe you were getting there and I just didn't understand, but I was, so the Edelweiss keeps track of your front list orders, correct? So, and your back list directly from
It
publishers,
has your
but
stock.
Your
It has
stock.
So-
your store stock.
It has
no
your store
matter
stock
where
as
it
well?
came from.
Yeah.
okay,
So, yeah.
I was not aware of that. That's
Yeah.
where I
Yeah.
was confused. I was like, but how do you track the Ingram? So that's good to know. I was kind of dropped into the buyer role I didn't know how to work Edelweiss or Ingram or anything, or Anthology, so except for how to sell books. So I'm sorry if my questions seem a little
No,
dumb.
not at
No,
all.
No.
you can sort Edelweiss by section number, the analytics.
Okay.
So you
Yeah.
can look and see, it'll show you exactly what books have been there for over 6 months and what needs to go.
Okay. and-
Also, really quick, just because you bought it from Ingram doesn't mean you can't return it to the publisher that publishes it.
Yeah, that's the part I was kind of getting to also.
You're welcome.
sorry, I didn't mean to
learned
interrupt
that.
you. I just got a
So
little confused.
it's a very layered
yeah, very
process,
nuanced.
but once you get into it, I'm basically like, I inherited a store that had none of this in place. You can return to wholesale and take a ding. And in my mind, to get some money back than no money back, because trying to put things on sale is a big hassle.
It's not worth it.
It's not worth it, in my opinion. I mean, people have lots of
If you have an
opinions.
8,000 square foot store, maybe it's totally worth it for you because walking around to do those returns might take longer than selling the
Yeah.
sale book or something.
And this is my very last one because I don't want to take up everybody else's time. But y'all keep talking about pirate ship. Does nobody use XPS for their shipping? Because
Never
it has
heard of it.
every single shipping option there is for every single company, and you can mass upload addresses and everything else too.
XPS?
XPS, yeah. I was just curious because I had never heard. I don't know if you have to pay for a membership or not. It might not be free because it was already established before I became buyer. But XPS, you literally put in the weight and everything, and then you have everything in front of you, all the different prices, and you pick which one.
Sounds awesome.
So I was just,
sounds
I wasn't
great.
sure.
I'll
if-
look it up.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you have to pay for it or not.
I
but-
will default to that. It's always good to check what's the best pricing for your store and what's going to cost more or not more, depending on where you are in the U.S. I mean, media mail, it's by weight, but FedEx, UPS, all that, you're always going to want to check to see what's the best rate for you. I use stamps.com specifically and Pirate Ship specifically because I have an indie commerce website. And my indie commerce website is set up so it can I can download my orders into Anthology, and I'm getting a little POS specific.
No, I have the same
Yeah.
thing, so this is all very good.
Yeah, and I'm
information
happy
for
to
me.
talk to you about it offline.
Yeah,
I have
'cause I'd hate to keep
very
anybody-
specific ones.
I can pass on my mic whenever anybody needs it.
And it makes it a lot easier. I have the download setups. I can download all of my orders from Indie Commerce into there, in addition to doing other things. So, yeah, I mean, You guys might have different processes, but that's why I default to those two.
Yeah, no, we use stamps.com too for most of our shipping, but when we ship FedEx, there's a FedEx. It's very similar to stamps.com, but it's just for FedEx. I can't think it's called FedEx Account Manager or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
No. Yeah.
I think there's a question back there.
I did really quick before you get to the question. What's on the screen right now is the schedule that I use for my stores. And you can see I color code them because we have the 3 stores. So I know when each one is done or all of them are done, when returns have been printed but haven't been finished, and et cetera. So if that's helpful to anyone. Okay.
Okay.
No.
The slides will be available on BookWeb
But later, yeah.
later.
My question is about the remaindering schedule and returning after you see that something has been remaindered. So my question, because I do not have a schedule, even though I should, to send things back, I got kind of horrified on Penguin Random House to see that, you have 3 months to return these couple of, these books in this listing that really haven't been out all that long. So I was a little freaked by that. And then I thought, how in the world do you keep up with that? How can you research what you might have against the remainder lists? And there's new ones every month. So, and maybe the answer is you can't do that. You just have to do things on a rigorous schedule. But interested in your thoughts.
Yeah, so we've done it a few ways, at least at our store. My husband's much better at doing that than I am. But basically, the Pub Easy part that I was talking about, and when we scan them in, when we're getting ready to do the box of returns, we double check in Pub Easy, and it pops back remaindered for PRH. Then our staff knows, because it's specifically in our directions, if it says remaindered and it's a specific publisher or this publisher or whatever, give it to my husband, and he'll double check the list. I would like to get to the point where it's not always give it to my husband. But I mean, I keep adding new directions every time. So like every time one of my returns person moves on, their responsibility is to update the directions that, anything we might have done that's new is in there. So, and it's, again, different for every single publisher. The message you get back from Pub Easy might say remainder. The other one might say awaiting stock. It might be saying something else. As long as it doesn't say out of print or remaindered, at least in the most part, I haven't had any issues with just returning those books. If I'm not sure about it, I email the rep.
I have seen also, if something is remaindered on PRH, say, there's usually a window where you could still return it to Ingram before it's no longer returnable. So it's always good to check Ingram too, because you will take a ding if you didn't order from them, but it's still worth it to get that money.
I have a very quick follow-up question. You said you can return to pubs even if you bought it from Ingram, even if you've never bought it from the publisher?
Yes.
Yes. Not Norton.
Not Norton. Good to
not
know.
Good. I mean, yes, not Norton. And
Norton
sometimes
is very
Scholastic.
weird. Norton's very weird about that.
Yes.
I don't care if it has their imprint on it. You cannot return it to them if you bought it from Ingram, which I think is freaking awful. I don't understand why they won't take their own books back, because now we have to double check every single book and make sure we actually purchased it from Norton before we send it back to them, which makes the return process 5 times more complicated. So I think we should all yell and scream at Norton and tell them to get in line with
Maybe
every
not.
other publisher in the entire industry and do it the same way.
I will say, to that point, Norton has a partnership program where if you meet with your rep once a month, you get 50% on all of your your POs with no shipping minimum. So there's very little reason for me to order a Norton book from Ingram at this point. I don't know if it's like you have to have a certain number, like level of sales to qualify for that. And it's at this point less than a year old, maybe a year old. So if you have a Norton rep, I would maybe ask them about that.
Yeah, I would definitely go to your Norton rep, and we might have been a little bit on the edge of the antitrust sort of guidelines with that one, but
Go ahead, on the right.
You kind of answered this question. So with the pointing out you can return books back to certain publishers without buying from them. But Last year we switched to POS, and because of that, our data got garbled when we switched to Book Manager. And so I have a bunch of books in my back that just have no history. And I was wondering if you have suggestions for like tracking down where I could put those books, because some publishers say like, you only have 6 months of your buying history on your database, and I can't look that up. So I was wondering if you had a process you go through when you don't know where a book goes to, or do you just automatically just send it back to the imprint and take that kind of that fee?
Yeah, so pre-pandemic, some of the publisher websites were not great, but okay, I'm going to give my pitch for Batch. If we had Batch here in the US, like in the UK, we could just go to Batch and just do it all in one place. But I will go into our publisher account, and my staff has now learned how to do this, on, say, Simon & Schuster or HarperCollins or whatever, and you can scan in the ISBN if you have a login set up, and it should show you what invoice came on. Now, if it's not showing an invoice, then maybe it's moved somewhere else.
Or, if you really want to spend the time doing that, you can email customer service and give them your account number and say, I bought this at some point. When was the last invoice? And is it still return eligible? If you don't want to spend that time, just return it to Ingram, and you'll take that little 10% ding or whatever and maybe save yourself some labor hours instead.
Emailing the publisher is part of my returns process. So if we can't find it somewhere else, put it back on the publisher.
Yeah, I think there was one over here.
Yeah. My question is Elena. So you said you do returns, 1 return per box. If you're doing one publisher and you amass 10 boxes or something like that, you
separate
still do
returns.
Okay.
Yep. Because if I have a 10-box return and one of those boxes goes missing and I don't know what's exactly in that one box, trying to get an insurance claim filed is an unbelievable pain in the butt. So this is something that I instituted a few years ago when we had that happen once or twice. And I said, nope, we're not doing it anymore. And it honestly doesn't add that much time to what we're doing.
Yeah, this picture here this is an older picture. We've rearranged multiple times. Our boxes aren't usually more than 35 pounds because we find that boxes that were over 35 pounds often come damaged.
Also, they make your mail person angry.
Yeah, yes. Have a very good relationship with your mail people.
Buy them cookies.
I happen to be very lucky that I'm in a small town, and my husband grew up with one of the mail people, and that we're only like 2 blocks from the post office. So in this picture, I guess on the right side, those are boxes by publisher, and the way we work is if a publisher box is full, then you empty that publisher box into one box for returns and send that box back.
I think there was one up here and then. Got one back here. Okay.
Shall I go? Hi. This is one of those annoying things where it's not really a question, but it's a sort of comparison with the UK systems, just because maybe it'll give some food for thought in different areas. First, I think on our side, the thing I just heard mentioned that we don't have is a system where if you bought it only from a wholesaler, we don't really have the option of sending that back to the publisher. So that's something for us to lobby on that I've learned today, because it makes complete sense. They should take their own books back. A couple of things we do have. I'm really interested by the amount of spreadsheet usage. I love spreadsheets, don't get me wrong. But our POS systems, all the main ones, have a kind of returns module that would enable you to build headers and track the progress through all the different stages of requested, shipped, etc., credited. So I'm kind of interested to know whether that is something and whether you find that they don't quite match all your needs and that's why you're using spreadsheet, or if that's something you'd be tending to push for in the future from POS systems.
It'd be great.
It would be great. I will say, and this is going to date me, I went to Denver. Winter Institute was where the first time I learned about batch, because I did a returns presentation there, and
I think I was in that session.
Yeah, the folks from Batch were like, let me show you what this can do. And really, in order for that, more booksellers need to lobby for something like that. I keep hearing, I'm a small store. My staff knows it takes up time to do returns and damages and all these things. So anything that's efficiencies would be really great. If you're a publisher, I mean, if I had it all in one place, and if you're not familiar with Batch, they are here in the vendor room by the ballroom.
Yeah.
They're worth talking to. I won't take all this time up because there's a whole nother Batch session, so should go to that.
Yeah, I'm delivering that Batch session.
Yeah.
Although I don't work for Batch.
Oh, hi, Nick.
Yeah, but I don't work for Batch.
Yeah.
So my point was first on the POS system, but then I was going to say, short term Batch payments and the more publishers and booksellers can use it here, it will be life-changing in terms of this. Long-term, the thing we have in the UK is where Batch does payments, but it also manages our returns process. Yes. And so the way we do a return is we don't have to, we get everything pre-authorized with one click. We build a list, we send the list to Penguin, and they say, these ones you can't send, all these you can, and it's 30 minutes later, you're good to go.
Sounds awesome.
It sounds awesome. If you want this,
I'm not gloating. I'm just saying that there is, there's the right lobbying.
All of you should go to Batch. All of you should talk to your publisher reps. I'm okay. Just go to the Batch system.
I think there was one in the back and then one up front.
Me? I just want to tag on to the returning and boxes that are getting lost. What we found success with the U.S. Postal Service, and Elena, this might help you. We used to do 5 or 6 boxes, and then of course we were like, well, crap, what was in that box that got lost? What we learned with the Postal Service, and we have really great success, is if you send it back and you have a value there, they don't know what's in that box. All they know is that the value is $250. I go back, I pull an invoice for roughly $250, file a claim, and I get a check from the Postal Service within a week. It's become super easy, but it took us a while to figure that out. So I don't track what's in each box. I just track value. And then when I have to file that claim, I find an invoice, submit it to the Postal Service, and we get a check within about a week or 2.
It's sneaky, and I like it.
It's very sneaky, but it works.
I will say that the tracking by book and what's in the box is helpful when you go to the publisher and say, hey, I got $220 worth of books in here, but you only gave me like $155. Here are the books that I'm missing. It's customer service call, but no, it's not double dipping. I returned books and they didn't give me credit for it. I have exactly... No. This isn't for loss. This is for like when you get your credit back from your publisher and they didn't credit you for all the books that you have in that box.
Hi, thank you so much for all of this information. I'm very new to returns. It's very daunting for me. My question, I don't know if it's applicable here, but it goes into event returns. And when we do a lot of really large events, and I find that it's always a big back and forth with publishers about call tags. And for some of them, it is like a simple answer, and others, it's very, very complicated. And usually we're the ones that are requested as a bookseller. So it feels logical to me that they're issued. My question comes in if there's a more succinct way to ask those sorts of questions to the publisher, and I guess more ways that we can get them honored as far as because we get a large amount usually for our events, and then I spend a lot of money to return them.
I would say, I don't know if maybe Jenny has a better response. We don't do a huge number of events. I know Abrams automatically, if it's an event order, they will do call tags, and they're super easy to work with that way. I would say my advice would be just to say, oh, great, you want us to be your bookseller. We'd be so happy to be your bookseller. Will you be able to issue call tags for any returns we have at the end of the event? And have that be in the email, so that it's in writing, and they can give you a straight yes or no answer. And if they say no, then you can maybe, you can decide whether you want to take on that risk yourself. And even if normally they would say no, they might say yes just because you asked. I think that's what I would do personally.
Yeah. So small store. So I do lots of things, including events and the buying. So we've had events with like Jan Brett where they want us to buy a certain amount. They have a suggested order, and I go to them and say, hey, that's a really big order. I mean, that's a lot of money for me. What are you going to do for me? Are you going to issue call tags for anything I don't have? Which leads me back to something we didn't really talk about is like publisher returns percentage. Like in my experience, the publishers say you should have around 20% of returns, because if you don't have as much, and this is assuming a returnable count, then you're maybe not taking as many chances on books that they want you to do. Of course, everybody has an opinion on this. So,
Yeah.
There's one over here too.
Question about shipping. You know, we've only been around 4 years, and we took a hard look at the ABA FedEx partnership program, and then we found that media mail was substantially less expensive, and we started using media mail. Except they lost packages on a never-ending basis, and it took sometimes 3 weeks to get back to our publisher partners. So we finally found Pirate Ship, and Pirate Ship's UPS ground discount is so substantial, it's actually less expensive in most cases than media mail, or within $1. They get there within 3 or 4 days, and it also is significantly less expensive than the FedEx partnership program. So Zachary, I'm just wondering, have you looked at the discount differences between the FedEx ground and Pirate Ship's UPS ground?
So I haven't looked at Pirate Ship before, but I know that when I've looked at UPS ground in stamps.com, it's usually about the same cost as it is for FedEx. And it's something that I'll review for sure, because it's expensive. And especially if you send a lot of boxes. Thank you.
Yeah, I just had a quick note about stale inventory. If we're pulling a report, we didn't talk much about sort of when and how you do that. But logically, for me, I was looking at it completely wrong for a little while. My wife pointed out how dumb I was about it. But if you pulled your stale based on when you got the books rather than the last time you sold one, you're really looking at it right. So if I get 3 copies of a book, and it's been 8 months, and I've got one on the shelf, well, if the last one I sold was 2 months ago, it's not stale. If I'm looking at a 6-month stale.
Right.
So, just to, in case anybody else in this room was thinking of stale in a different way, as when it comes in, rather than looking at it when you sold your last one.
That's a great point. And each point of sale is going to have a different way of going about this. Basil, has returns workspace. So I give it criteria that I want it to give me data back on. And then I have a series of column sorting that I do to narrow down. And one of the first things I look at is last month's sale and last 3 months sales. And I pretty much get rid of everything that has any sales within the last 3 months, unless we are significantly overstocked. So something that we've sold 2 of in the last 3 months, but we have 16 of, I probably want to get my money back on a bunch of those and keep a few on hand, but I definitely don't need 16. So it's a great point. And so you're looking at that last in date, you're looking at that last sale date. The way Basil is, I can look at the last up to year and lifetime sales. You can also see if you have multiple locations, you can see whether other stores have sold that title up to a year and lifetime sales. There's a huge amount of data. Every store is going to be a little bit different on what you're going to want to get rid of. But yes, exactly. It's a very good point. That something that you last got in 3 copies 8 months ago, but if you're selling one every 2 months, you probably want to keep it on your shelf because it's paying its rent.
Yeah, it's very similar anthology. We set up a report based on our requirements and sections and whatnot, but we also integrate it kind of in our new releases / moving to each section. We have a new release table. Everything that's new, because I'm a smaller store, pretty much goes on the new release table or in the kids' new release table. And then next week it goes to its section table. And then the next week it goes onto the shelf. Depending on when it goes onto the shelf, we will decide whether we want to keep 6 copies. I'm just saying 6 because that's often how many you have to buy for co-op reasons. That's a whole nother story. And we'll decide, is that going to pay for its space, if it's in a section table for a while. So integrating these sort of things into your everyday is also helpful. We will also, when the paperback comes in, when people are checking in books, the part of that process is that if the paperback comes in, you need to check if we still have the hardcover. And it's so ingrained into our store that people are like upset. Well, they didn't check that one. I found both of them side by side on the shelf. Like, can you remind that person? So think of it as a whole cycle that's part of your systems is very helpful.
I think this is for Zachary. You use Edelweiss for analytics. Is there a way to, I think that, remind me if I'm wrong, because I've gone back and forth between our POS system and Edelweiss. And if it's a quantity, does the quantity of books on your shelf affect the, I guess, the display of whether or not something is stale in your inventory? In other words, if you have 10 and they haven't sold in 2 weeks versus 1 and hasn't sold in 2 weeks, does it tell you something differently?
It will tell you the quantity. I don't think that it affects the staleness of the item.
Okay.
So I think if you have 10 of them and they haven't sold in 3 months, it's just as stale as something that you have 1 of and haven't sold in 3 months. I don't think it's making that distinction.
It does affect turns, though, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
For those of you that are newer, what we're talking about is analytics and Edelweiss, which is separate from necessarily ordering. So there's 2 tiered levels. There's like a Summit Advanced level, and there's like a lower level, and there's more reporting, I guess is what to say, at the Summit level. If you're not familiar with this, the Edelweiss folks are also in the vendor room, and we have 4 minutes left, so I probably can take one more question.
I just wanted to say really quick about the hardcover thing. One thing that our store does, we've started doing, is we look on either the Wednesday or Thursday before Tuesday, and we make a report of every single paperback that's coming out, and we go around our store and we harvest all of those hardcovers, and we do various things with them depending on the title. we might return them, or we might put them in a special section for people to find last chance.
Yeah, I have a staff member. She loves doing that. She's like, how can she knows she's very on top on release dates, and she's like, how can I move that book around so I can sell that hardcover and not return it?
So we had our last question over here.
Okay, so I'm kind of an odd man out here because I am owned by a couple that has another retail location, and I'm the bookstore. So we don't have a bookstore specific POS. So like all of what you're talking about is like a dream for me. I have no way to track inventory. I have no idea when I bought a book. Nothing. So like, do you have any ideas, and I know we only have a couple minutes, on how I could manage this?
Where do you get your books from? Ingram or publishers, or both? So Ingram has a whole returns module, so you can definitely use
good
that.
on that. So basically what we're doing now is we're just like looking at the books and being like, man, I've front faced that one a lot of times and it's still here. Let's get rid of it. So that's like what we're doing now. And then we don't have returnable through publishers because it's a lower discount. We're not profitable. So it's like a lot of tensions to manage.
Yeah. My staff really loves blind date with a book. So we go with a blind date. I mean, people love that. So we'll take books that are slower sellers, wrap that up and sell it. Now, if we get to the point that we're just desperate, it can go in a non-returnable. We can donate it to a school or whatever. Probably not the best practice. The other way we could do it is multiple books. We found success with not having a sales section, and people really love these mystery books. We'll bundle 3 in there, and whatever your comfort level is for getting a certain amount of money back, price that at, like, if you're okay with getting just what you paid for it back, you could do something like, and this is going to be like 3 books for $22. It is really up to you. If you're non-returnable, you have to find some more creative ways to get rid of that old stock.
We have a few publishers that we're non-returnable with, and we have a large sales section in the store. And on our website, we just added, we've done it a couple times. We just re-added. You can buy a mystery book just like Jenny's saying. We do it for $5. You add a mystery book to your website order, and it pops up on the checkout when you're checking out. And we use the sale books from the non-returnable, and we wrap it in brown paper and add it to somebody's order. And it's a huge success. People love it. And it's just to get something back for the books that probably never will sell in the store. So that works really well.
I will say that, and please ignore me if you're from Ingram in here, when I first took over my store, because I got so much dead stock, we had a threshold, and I think it's $6. If it was $6 or more, we were willing to return it to Ingram and take that ding just to get anything. But I'm happy to
I
talk
feel
offline.
you on that one.
Yeah,
I'm right there with you.
I'm happy to talk to you offline about what we did because I had no point of sale system before. And if you're with Square, are there anybody is in Shopify? There is a Square Facebook group online where they share a lot of best practices. There is also, they have worked with, I'm probably just throwing out his name, and he probably doesn't know, Dave Lucy. Yeah, if you see him and you have Square, great person to connect with. He's worked with Edelweiss a lot to figure out how to do data and that sort of thing. So I'm happy to talk to you offline. If you have questions about anything, I think a lot of us are available to talk offline about things.
Yes, don't hesitate to accost us later at some point if you have a question.
Yes. And please, we would love your feedback on this session. Make sure you add the session to your app if you have the app and do the survey. And again, the best way, the one thing I love about these conferences is meeting people and introduce yourself to whoever's next to you. Maybe you're going to learn something new from them. Zach, I met in Memphis. Yes. And it's been a great resource.
The Winter Institute, I had the flu the whole time.
Oh no, I'm so sorry.
If you got the flu after Memphis, I'm so sorry.
Yes. Make lots of friends. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Bookstore Education Podcast, brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app. Additional educational resources can always be found on the ABA website at www.bookweb.org. Happy reading!